Well, it appears that we now know what befell Mesotora. Quite a chance he took, isn't it? And it appears as if the turn of events is working out in his favor, at least in some ways. But the story isn't over quite yet. So, let's return back to where we began the story. Mesotora had just arrived on the scene, if you didn't recall. "What the hell happened to you?" Hamilton shouted, trying to shake some sense into Mesotora as he struggled to stay on his feet. The gates leading to the human world from Matara. Someone sabotaged them. And right after I had been given something that would lead me straight to my son. It was too much. Too much to be considered a coincidence. So, despite the dangers, I embarked through the gate without the protective tunnel in place. I have no idea how long I was in there. I only barely managed to make it through. The cascading energies. Well, let's just say that they did a number on me. But we have to get out of here for now. Go to somewhere safe. Somewhere they're not going to be able to tell what has befallen me. If they do, they will be back. Absolutely, Hamilton replied. Sailus, we could use some cover. Don't worry, I'm already on it, he said, as they began to see all of the entities that he had summoned from the fog filtering their way into the woods, chasing after the figures that ran away. Trust me, they're going to be far too distracted, at least for the time being, and cover is no problem, he said, as a large amount of fog began to form a wall, filtering into the woods and covering the clearing in which they stood, making it difficult to see, even short distances. Come on, we'll go. I'll keep the fog here. We already have a place set up. It should be safe, at least for a short time, and no one will be able to tell what's going on inside. Come on, Sailor said, putting Mesotora's other arm over his shoulder. As they did, they looked back to the rest of the group, standing there in stunned silence, all of them watching this interaction unfold and unsure of what to do in it. Well, don't just stand there, turn around. We have to get back to the house, now, Sailor shouted. Yes, of course, Melody replied. Come, it's this way, she said, as she turned around and began heading towards the house. What? Rico no get? Who picked Dragon Man? Rico said, looking around confused as everybody headed back towards the house. Rico simply growled a bit in frustration and followed suit. Eventually, they found themselves back inside of Talion's small and quaint home, closing the door behind them as they entered. They quickly sat Mesotora down at the table. Thankfully, he was still able to stay upright. However, it wasn't clear how long that would last. He seemed in terrible condition and was losing a great deal of blood. Talion couldn't help but stare at him. He had so many questions about himself, about Mesotora and his mother, about what was going to happen if he did indeed decide to return home. So, Hamilton, I see you've met up with Sailus. I didn't expect you to fetch him for this mission. I didn't. Believe it or not, I simply stumbled across him. It seemed that Sailus had actually come in contact with your son before you ever sent me. Apparently, it was him training your son that originally triggered the demonic detection system here on Earth. He was beginning to train your son up make him strong and capable, at which point he was going to return him home. The demonic detection system simply waylaid his plans. What? Mesotora replied, sounding shocked. So, my son, he is here. He's safe? He said, beginning to look around, for the first time truly taking stock of who was present. Where is he? He said, as he found that there was no one who would meet his son's description in the room. Oh, sorry about that, Salus replied. I have some illusion cloaking him for the moment. It's no problem. I'll just take it down, he said, waving his hand, as the fog illusion that coated Taleon and Rico faded away, being drawn back to Salus. Mesotora gazed, wide-eyed at Taleon as his true full form was revealed. Avalar, is that really you? He said, looking stunned, but at the same time, a small smile beginning to find its way to his face. My son, you're all right. Yeah. My name's Taleon. I guess you named me Avalar, though, right? Taleon said, being unsure of how to truly respond. He was transfixed, bound with countless emotions. This is my house, where I live with my mother, where I've lived, well, my whole life. That's my mother there, Melody, he said, pointing to his mother, who very quickly walked to his side. It's okay, Taleon. You don't have to be nervous, she said, looking down at him. As he looked up at his mother, he found that she wasn't exactly happy. She seemed more or less concerned, maybe a little frightened. Your mother, you say, Mesotora said, looking at Taleon and this unknown woman standing beside her son, or should he say his son. Yes, my name is Melody, as Taleon has told you. From what I'm led to understand, the day that Taleon, or as you know him, Avalar, was taken, he was taken here to the human world. I stumbled upon his kidnapper, attempting to kill him. Seeing a man about to kill a child, I took it upon myself to do away with him. Afterwards, I had no knowledge of where Taleon came from, or where I might possibly return him to. And having recently lost my own child, I felt as if he was a blessing. And from that day on, I raised him as my own child for nearly 10 years here in this place, Melody said, still seeming somewhat nervous with the situation. I surmise that you are his father, his original father. I know that by all rights, Taleon belongs to you. He is your child, Melody said, sounding both hurt and fearful. I know that you have most likely spent a great deal of time wondering what Taleon's life has been, or Avalar. I assure you that I raised him with every bit of love that I possibly could. I only found out about his true origins after he came of age to learn magic, something that has been passed down in my family for generations. After finding out that he could not perform magic as I do, I sought a teacher, and ended up finding Salus, who informed me of Taleon's true origins. I eventually had to come to terms with the fact that Taleon would no doubt want to meet his real parents, Melody said, stepping away from Taleon for a moment, gently walking forward towards Mesotora. I know that you most likely think of me as some sort of lesser being. I am, after all, a human being, and I know that you may think that I have no right to ask this of you, but I cannot help but ask. If Taleon returns home to the demon realm, to you and his original mother, where will that leave me? She said, trying to speak to Mesotora, but unable to maintain eye contact. You are just a human. You are not his actual mother. You haven't any right to ask your place because you don't have one, Hamilton replied, sounding almost offended by the question. Hamilton, Mesotora said, sounding upset. I didn't ask for you to interject. You may continue, Mesotora replied, looking at Melody. If Taleon returns with you to the demon realm, can I go with him? Can I still be with him? Melody asked, her hands beginning to clutch onto the dress she wore, as she slowly bent to her knees, clinging tight to the dress and bowing her head very lowly, as teardrops began to fall, dotting the stone floor beneath her. I know it may seem absurd. The idea itself may be offensive to you, but if there is any place in your heart that might hear this plea, that might understand my wishes and my fears, the love that I have for my son is beyond anything else. I care not if it's shameful. I wish for only one thing, to be with my son. He is all I have in this entire world. You may ask anything you want of me. Anything that I possess, I will give. If you requested the beating heart from my chest, so long as it meant that I could stand beside my son, I would give it gladly. So regardless of whether you find it shameful, regardless of whether you even consider me a person, what you think of me at all, if there is any part of you that understands the love that I have for him, then I beg you, do not take my son away. I will give anything, sacrifice anything, but do not force me to live in a world where I cannot see him, where his smile is beyond my sight, where his warmth is beyond my reach. Please, Melody said, teardrops still falling to the stone floor. As Melody knelt there, weeping, pleading, so that she might continue to see her son, she heard the clanking of armor as Mesotora moved from his seat. For a moment she flinched, frightened that this plea might offend him, that what might be coming is some sort of attack. But what she felt was a hand on her shoulder, very gently. Look at me, Mesotora said. Melody slowly began to raise her head, to look up towards Mesotora. As she did, she was astonished to find tears in his eyes. Thank you, Mesotora said. You have no idea how long I have wondered what fate befell my son, where he was, what devious forces might have him in their clutches, whether he was in pain or suffering or alone. You have no idea what this means to me. To know that while my son may have been astray, lost in a different world, he did not grow up not knowing love or kindness or understanding, to have by chance or circumstance or even fate found himself in the possession of someone who loved him so truly, who thought of him not as a burden, but as their very own, who would love him so unconditionally that they would give anything rather than be separated from them, fills my heart with a joy that I cannot define with words. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you, and I promise you, your love shall not be abandoned here. For anyone who has truly given as much love to my son as you have, who has cared for him as you have, who desires to be with him as you do, I would never leave you out in the cold. I assure you, within the halls of our palace, you will be welcome. Human or not, I will see to it.